Hey guys, welcome back to WhiteCheeto Gaming, where you can find all of your basic tips on Total War games. We just finished our Total War Troy unit guides, and now we're moving on to Warhammer 2. If you are interested in this content and want to keep up to date with future guides, hit that subscribe button. Today we'll be looking at the unit roster of the Dark Elves. The Dark Elf roster is decently varied. They have infantry, cavalry, strong missile troops, and artillery, and a few monsters and flying units are also available. Dark Elf troops have fairly good leadership and speed and tend to be expensive as they rely on quality over quantity. Similar to the High Elves, Dark Elves have a faction-wide ability called Murderous Prowess. This ability shows that the Dark Elf faction thrives on killing and killing fast. During battle, there will be a meter beside the balance of power bar. This meter fills up as you kill units on the battlefield. Once the meter is full, all Dark Elf units will gain the ability Murderous Prowess, while more elite units will gain Murderous Mastery. Murderous Prowess has a 90-second duration, gives 20% armor-piercing missile damage, 25% charge bonus, 25 melee attack, 15 leadership, and 18% vigor, while Murderous Mastery gives even more enhanced buffs. We will not be covering Lords and Heroes in this guide. Please note that this guide is mainly for campaign use and not multiplayer, and we will also not be covering the regiments of Renown variants due to them being just stronger versions of their normal counterparts with some added abilities. First up, we have the Bleak Swords. These are your standard frontline troops with shields. It is suggested to pit these guys up against infantry-sized units, as large units will likely win against them on one-on-ones. Since they are shielded, you should take advantage of them by using them to soak up enemy missile fire. Dread Spears. These are your spear and shield infantry. They have bonus versus large units, charge defense against large units. They have good morale and melee defense, but lower melee attack, which makes them better at holding the front line compared to the Bleak Swords. The key use for these units is to protect your back line, or use them against monstrous units or cavalry, while also being good for soaking up missile fire. Black Art Corsairs. These are not considered elite infantry, but they do have some decent killing power. They have higher armor values and bonus versus infantry, which allows them to excel in melee infantry encounters. They should be kept in reserves to bolster your frontline clash or used for flanking. They should not be relied on to hold the front lines on their own. The Witch Elves are one of the first elite units that have access to Murderous Mastery. They have bonus versus infantry, which makes them great for fighting other melee infantry units. They also have the ability Dodge, which makes them quite durable against those melee units. This unit applies the Madness of Cain debuff that forces their target to rampage and be uncontrollable. This also reduces the affected enemy's melee defense by 10% and speed by 24%. This makes the Witch Elves great for locking down high-value enemy troops. It should be noted that they do have very low armor and no shields, so you will need to protect them from the enemy missile fire. The Sisters of Slaughter. They can be considered one of the best frontline units of the Dark Elf roster, aside from the Blackguard. They can hold quite well against non-large units and even armor-piercing units due to their poison attacks and extra physical resistance buffs they get. They have an ability called Trial of Blades, which gives them plus 9 melee attack and 4 armor-piercing weapon damage. Just be sure to keep these guys away from units with magical attacks. The Harganeth Executioners. These are an elite anti-infantry unit. They are not designed to hold the front line and will go down quite quickly if focus fired from armor-piercing missiles. They are best kept in reserves behind the front lines. Once the front lines clash, send in the executioners to grind them up. The Blackguards of Naggaroth. These are the elite frontline units of the Dark Elf roster. They have bonus versus large, armor-piercing, and charge defense against large units. These guys can be used to hold the center of your frontline engagement, or you can keep them in reserves to counter any monstrous units that engage. It should be noted that they are also immune to psychology, so any terror or fear abilities have no effect on them. The first of the Dark Elf Missile Infantry are the Dark Shards. I would not recommend using this unit if you have access to the Dark Shards with shields. The upkeep difference is minimal, but the survivability difference is quite large. If you do utilize them, place them in the back line and protect them using Bleak Swords and Dread Spears with some low-cost melee infantry set in your reserves. Shielded Dark Shards. These are the much stronger variant due to their shields. They have a low range, which makes them vulnerable to missile fire. However, they have very high armor-piercing values that allow them to decimate any unit that they focus fire. Be sure to place them in the back line and protect them with low-cost melee infantry in reserves. Black Ark Corsairs with handbows make them much better for flanking. They can be used in the same way as the melee variant, but allow them to fire a few volleys into the enemy's flanks before you charge them in. Shades. Compared to Dark Shards, Shades have an increased firing rate, higher movement speed, better melee stats, at the cost of not having shields. They are relatively poor skirmishers, but you can utilize their vanguard deployment to strategically place them on the side of the battlefield behind the enemy. Shades offer equally strong ranged attacks with better melee stats and the ability to stalk and ambush units. Shades with dual weapons. These have bonus versus infantry on their melee attacks and slightly higher melee stats overall. This is a solid bonus, but not entirely worth it. Usually it is better to use the greatsword variants. Shades with greatswords are the much better variant to choose from the three, providing higher armor piercing values and higher bonus versus infantry values. You should utilize these guys in the same way as the regular Shades, vanguard deploying them on the sides of the battlefields so that they can flank the enemy once they clash with your front line. Dark Riders. These are a very fast cavalry with the ability to vanguard deploy. They have fairly low melee defense, so they should be mainly used for harassing the enemy backline or artillery pieces. Dark Shards with shields. This is the much better variant due to them having shields. This gives them miss block chance and a higher melee defense values. I would suggest using these over the regular Dark Riders. Utilize them in the same way as the regular Dark Riders by harassing the enemy backline or their artillery pieces. Coldm Knights. These are a solid shock cavalry with the ability to counter enemy cavalry with their bonus versus large, or you can use them to deliver crushing charges to the front line from their flanks. They are armored and have armor-piercing damage. This gives them staying power, but you should more rely on psycho-charging them instead. Their weakness is their slow speed and primal instincts, which causes them to rampage when low health. Doomfire Warlocks. This is a very good unit because they come with two bound spells, a lesser version of Doombolt and Soul Blight. Doombolt is good for direct damage against enemies, and Soul Blight is useful for debilitating the enemies. It should be noted that they can only cast their spells when above 50% health. Aside from their spells, they are good combatants with magic and poison damage, as well as high physical resistance, although they have pretty low armor and melee defense, so they don't have much staying power. They're also useful for chasing down routing units or harassing the backline. Coldm Dread Knights. Compared to the regular Coldm Knights, the Dread Knights gain much better melee attack, defense, and armor while losing the very important bonus against large units, as well as some as their charge bonus. These excel at fighting infantry, but the Dark Elf army already has elite infantry equipped for that. Deploying Dread Knights might be a bit of an overkill and also deprive you of a good answer to enemy cavalry. Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. This is an excellent unit mainly for harassing enemy missile infantry or artillery pieces, but nothing else really. You can use them to fire at the flanks of the enemy frontline clash as well. Scourge Runner Chariots. This is an excellent missile chariot. They have heavy armor piercing and anti-large missiles that will easily tear down anything they focus. When out of ammunition, they become effective chariots that can be used for running down routing infantry. It is also quite difficult to pin them down with missile fire or any type of cavalry, which makes them a very effective harassing unit. The Coldm Chariots are rarely used over their much more efficient Scourge Runner Chariots. They have range attacks, but they are not as effective. When you want a tankier anti-armor chariot, the Coldm Chariots is the choice for you. They are best used against the factions like Dwarves or Chaos. They also have primal instincts, so they will rampage after hitting a certain threshold of health. Harpies. These are a flying unit with surprisingly high melee defense, which puts them more into a supporting role compared to the other flying units. They are best used for interrupting cavalry charges or holding down enemy missile infantry or artillery pieces. Pharaoh Manticore. Their greatest weakness is being prone to rampaging even when at high health. Much stronger melee stats than Harpies, but slightly lower than the Black Dragon. They should be used for disrupting artillery or missile units, or you can have them support the frontline battle. Just make sure they are not pit against anti-large units. The War Hydra. This guy excels at terrorizing the enemy infantry, first incinerating them with his fiery breath and then crushing them with his charge. It is lightly armored for a monster, but it has regeneration and high melee damage. You can use these guys for bolstering your frontline battle. They'll bring a lot of terror and quite a lot of pressure on the front lines. The Charybdis, a large monstrous unit killer providing terror. With its high armor piercing values and bonus versus large, it can deal massive damage to monstrous units. It has the ability Abyssal Howl, which also reduces leadership of units nearby, which is useful for scattering enemy units. It lacks armor and melee defense, meaning it can take damage very quickly. However, it can tank a lot of missile fire due to its high armor and scaly skin ability, providing missile resistance. Keep these guys fighting in the frontline battle or send them after other monstrous units or cavalry. The Black Dragon. It is a valuable, armor-piercing, fear and terror-causing monster. Its breath attacks can be used to deal massive damage to enemies from afar. 25% missile resistance on top of its high armor values allows it to tank many volleys of enemy missiles. You can use this unit in many ways. You can use them to disrupt and destroy artillery pieces or missile infantry, or you can have them in the frontline battle just causing terror and helping you win the frontline battle, or you can send them after the enemy lord. But the most use will be probably utilizing them on the front lines. The Bloodrack Medusa, a solid monster unit that moves quickly across the battlefield causing terror. It has decent melee stats and a high damaging missile attack. Her missiles fire very quickly, so it is suggested to use her to snipe down enemy cavalry. Also, be sure to protect her from enemy missile fire because her low armor values mean she will not last long against enemy missile fire, and keep her away from the frontline engagements. The Bloodrack Shrine. This unit contains a Medusa placed on the chariot, giving some magical auras while causing terror. It provides the Aura of Agony, reducing leadership by 4 and melee defense by 7 to surrounding enemies, and it also provides the Aura of Ardor, which provides a +4 leadership and +7 melee attack buff to surrounding allies. You need to place this shrine in the center of your frontline engagement and try to protect her from anti-large artillery fire or any armor-piercing missiles. Reaper Bolt Throwers. A fairly basic artillery piece with capabilities of switching between anti-infantry ammo and anti-large. It also has armor-piercing missiles. Keep them in the back line. Always have some units in reserve to protect them from cavalry. Now we're going to look into a basic early/mid-game army composition. This should be able to hold well against many armies if you utilize them correctly. You'll want 3 Bleak Swords, 3 Dread Spears, 2 Black Ark Corsairs, 6 Dark Shards, 2 Dark Riders with Shields, 2 Cold One Knights, and 1 Reaper Bolt Thrower. You want to utilize your Dark Shards by focus firing many enemy units, and you just have the Bleak Swords and Dread Spears to sort of hold the front lines as long as they can. Okay, so now we're going to want to look at how we want to form up our army in the battlefield. We're going to want to put our 3 Bleak Swords in the center of our front lines. 2 of the Dread Spears will be on the flanks. They'll be used to stop any incoming cavalry that try to come around the flanks. We'll have our 6 Dark Shards in the center. These will be used to focus fire 1 target at a time. They'll completely decimate anyone they focus. We have our extra Dread Spear here in the reserves. These guys will protect anyone who gets through the flanks. Any fast units that'll squeeze through, these guys will intercept them. And they're also used to protect the Reaper Bolt Throwers. Reaper Bolt Thrower is in the back. They have very large range, so you can use them to snipe down large units or the heavily armored melee infantry. We have Black Ark Corsairs on reserves on the flanks. These guys will be coming around the flanks to hit the enemy front lines in the back so once they clash. We also have some Dark Riders hidden in the woods. They're Vanguard deployed. So they're deployed further up to this white line. They're hidden in the woods. They're quite fast, so they'll be used to chase down the missile infantry that'll be in the back. Once the front lines clash, we'll bring in the Dark Riders. They'll chase them down and chase them off the battlefield so we don't have to deal with the missile fire. And then we have the coldm Knights. These are the stronger, heavy-hitting cavalry units. They're slow, but they're very strong. They have a high charge bonus, so you'll want to be using these guys, cycle-charging them into the frontline engagement from their flanks. So front lines will clash, these guys will come around and hit them in the backs. We'll have Dark Riders chasing down enemy missile infantry, so they're not firing at these guys' backs. Any fast units will be intercepted with these dread spears in the flanks. And then we'll just have our lord, whoever you have, just have them in the dead center. You can place them up here, doesn't really matter. So that about wraps it up for our Dark Elf unit roster guide. Hope you found it useful for your Dark Elf campaigns. I will be slowly releasing faction unit guides for Warhammer 2 until we have a full playlist of all the factions in Warhammer 2. If you enjoy this content here, make sure you drop a like. Also, hit that subscribe button to keep up to date on any guides I release in the future.